power of unrivaled technology. These are the cornerstones in the foundation of the Roman Empire.
They were driven by a kind of collective cultural ego.
Rome's colossal building projects, stadiums, palaces, roads, aqueducts, spanned 3 continents and unleashed the power and promise of the world's most advanced civilization.
These structures became symbols of that idea of Rome.
But while the Romans dominated the landscape with massive feats of construction, they were ultimately powerless to prevent their own self-destruction.
Caesar's rise to power was predicated on him wanting to have the best standing in the Roman state. He seemed to want too much power for himself. He did not share power with others, and this was what led directly to his assassination.
Decades earlier, as an ambitious young general, Caesar had recognized that the road to glory in Rome began on battlefields far from it. His thirst for military conquest would spawn the construction of one of Rome's most intimidating feats of engineering. In 55 BC, Julius Caesar is leading 8 Roman legions, a total of 40,000 men, north through Gaul, a Roman province encompassing modern France, Belgium, and Switzerland.
He wants to go to Germania, to Germany, and cross the Rhine because no Roman commander has yet done so. He wants to be as great a conqueror as Alexander the Great and go beyond what is known.
The Rhine River lies on the edge of what is known. For centuries, it has been a buffer protecting Germanic tribes from Roman expansion. No previous army could cross it with the might needed for conquest. But Caesar is unlike any previous warrior.
He could have gone by boat, but what is that for Julius Caesar to go by boat, man? Rowboat? You know, you're gonna put 8 legions in a rowboat and row across? No, man, they gotta march across. They're gonna be on horseback.
From the engineering point of view, the difficulties in constructing a bridge over such a river are enormous in relationship to the depth of the water and the forceful current. If you bear in mind that this had to be done in a short period of time due to military needs, the work is actually truly exceptional.
The bridge would need to be 4 football fields long and sustain the weight of 40,000 soldiers. Despite the Rhine's width, depth, and strong currents, Julius Caesar is determined to succeed.
To cross a river that size with a bridge is something which plays well with an audience back at home, but of course it's something that plays extremely well with the audience standing on the other side of the river, who are going to be awestruck when they see this happening.
With the speed and efficiency of a well-oiled machine, Caesar's soldiers methodically transform local timber into an expanding bridge. With every hour, an engineering miracle inches closer to the Rhine's elusive northern bank.
It's almost as if a spaceship were to come down nowadays, the size, let's say, of half of Manhattan, capable of with some magnetic device that'll like lifting buildings up into the air. That would be a pretty frightening thing, something that we couldn't really grasp at all.
The foundation of the bridge was a series of wooden piles driven into the bedrock of the river. Each pile was 1.5 feet thick. Toward the middle of the bridge, they had to be up to 30 feet tall to reach from the surface to the bottom. By driving the piles in diagonally, Caesar's engineers added extra stability to the bridge.
When they drove the pilings in at an angle and then connected them, in many ways they were doing what carpenters do when they build a sawhorse. With the legs angled, it utilizes forces to keep it from being pushed over and makes it a stable workspace.
The sloping pile gives them a lot more strength against the force of the river and flooding of the river and so on, but it's much more difficult to drive them into the riverbed than it is to drive a vertical pile. So they would have had to work very carefully with wooden frames to push them into the riverbed.
On the upstream side, the piles leaned in the direction of the current. 40 feet downstream, the corresponding piles leaned against the current. Each set of piles was joined by a long connecting beam 2 feet thick. Lengths of timber were then laid across the beams, and the surface was finished with tightly wrapped bundles of sticks. The design of the bridge itself was innovative, but what made this engineering feat even more astounding is the speed with which it was built. Just 10 days after ordering its construction, Caesar marched across his bridge and toward his destiny.
If we tried to do that today, we would never be able to build something like that in so few days with that kind of technology. We could match that feat today if we had thousands of loyal, sweating soldiers totally dedicated to Caesar and the objective of getting across that Rhine River to terrorize the Germans beyond.
Caesar had estimated the size of the Germanic forces at 430,000, more than 10 times the size of his own army. But when the Germans saw the Roman legions rolling over the Rhine, they quickly fled to higher ground. For the next 18 days, Caesar freely explored the territory north of the Rhine, encountering no resistance. Then he crossed back over his bridge and dismantled it, having made an unmistakable point.
It is symbolic of this. Rome can go anywhere. There's nothing going to hold Rome back. And to distill it even farther, Julius Caesar can go anywhere.
Caesar's bridge was an early indication of his single-minded ambition. A decade later, that ambition would propel him to unprecedented power, but it would also prove to be his downfall. When he was declared Rome's first dictator for life at the age of 55 in 44 BC, whispers of assassination began to echo through the halls of the Roman Senate.
He makes certain moves that
The Roman city itself was the greatest image-creating device, I believe, that the Romans had. And those cities survive today. London, Bonn, Paris are all testaments to Rome's expansion of its culture through its cities.
Rome's engineers had a secret weapon that enabled them to build bigger, stronger, and faster than anyone else. Waterproof concrete, mixed with a volcanic sand called pozzolana.
Early concretes were just a simple lime-mortar mix, which, although they would set, weren't very strong, and indeed the particles in the early concrete could easily break apart. But in Roman concrete, the pozzolan sand reacted with the lime, and it makes a concrete quite like a modern concrete, much, much stronger.
The mortar of the hydraulic.
One in particular would revolutionize daily life in Rome for centuries to come. By the 1st century AD, Rome had emerged as Europe's sole superpower. And as the Romans expanded their empire outward, they also looked inward and used their superior engineering skills to improve the quality of life within the walls of the capital city. Of all the achievements of Rome's engineers, none were as life-altering as running water.
Rome's system of water distribution was a quantum leap to anything which had come before it.
In the capital city, 11 aqueduct lines guided a steady stream of fresh water to its citizens, carrying a combined 200 million gallons a day into the city from mountain springs miles away.
What the aqueducts did was really revolutionized the daily life of Roman citizens. Not just the gardens and the villas of the wealthy or the palaces of the emperors, but the average Roman. So much water was available in the city of Rome, and this sustained an enormous population.
The aqueducts fostered the growth of a new urban culture. With a constant stream of water, up to 1 million people were able to live cleanly and comfortably in the capital city.
And it's the water from the aqueducts which can flush out the human filth and keep your city clean. This is another reason why the Romans think that they're superior. It's because they're cleaner than everybody else.
No single emperor can claim credit for the success of the aqueducts. They were built over the course of several centuries.
Aqueduct is another thing.
The Romans engineered their aqueducts to approach the city on a gradual declining angle, or gradient. That gradient was just several inches every 100 feet.
The slope of the aqueduct had to be calculated from great distances, 20, 30, sometimes even 40 miles, from the source in the mountains to the cities themselves. That had to be consistent. They couldn't deviate from it, regardless of what the terrain was.
To maintain the water's precise descent through high mountains, Roman engineers dug perfectly angled tunnels through them. When the pipelines reached low valleys, they were elevated on stone walls. If the walls needed to be higher than 6.5 feet off the ground, the Romans saved building materials while still adding strength by perfecting an ancient engineering concept, the arch.
The arch revolutionized architecture in the ancient world by permitting far greater spans than had been allowable before. They basically changed the spatial conception totally of Roman architecture.
Arches were built around a temporary wooden framework that held each stone in place until the keystone was laid in the center. The keystone evenly distributed weight down each side of the arch, allowing builders to stack additional stones above it.
Arches are improvement upon building just a straight wall in a variety of means, both in terms of their efficiency and in terms of their strength.